afternoon, everybody, and welcome back for those of you that have participated in our Avalon Integration and Zebra Technologies podcast series. Today, we're talking about RFID and is it really ready for prime time? Once again, I'm Anthony Grosso, New York Metro Regional Channel Manager for Zebra Technologies, and alongside me again is Mike Kula, Vice President of Sales and Operations at Avalon Integration. How you doing, Mike?
How you doing, Anthony? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And we also have a special guest today, Eric Malmed from Zebra Technologies. He's one of my Holtzville partner of crimes, so to speak. He's our global product manager for RFID technology. How you doing, Eric?
Good, guys. How are you?
Hey, Great. Eric. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Mike.
Thanks for joining us today. So So before we really get into it, I want to talk about RFID again. And it's been around for a long time. I've been with Zebra, as you guys know, for 22 years now. And my job responsibilities is really to know pretty much the entire portfolio. And I've been hearing about RFID since the mid 2000s. I'm no subject matter expert by any stretch of the imagination, but, I've definitely heard a lot about it. Our listeners may have heard, the NFL story with Zebra and how we track player movements. That's probably the most public aspect of the Zebra RFID portfolio. But, like I said, I'm not a subject matter expert, but I rely on my colleagues like Eric to know the portfolio and know what's coming out in the future and where the portfolio fits when it comes to our partners and our customers. And I also rely on my partners like Avalon Integration, who's recently was given RFID specialization certification in our partner program because of their investment and knowledge and success in the RFID portfolio. So Mike, congrats on that, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Happy to be part of that group.
Yeah. So, that those two is very important as far as, really understanding, what I need to know when it comes to customer applications. Like I said, I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to RFID. I know barcode scanning versus RFID, where barcode scanning is a line of sight application. And, you could scan one barcode at a time, where RFID, you need a general area. You could scan many tags at one time with the right software application. And, I've learned also how the technology works when it comes to active and passive tags, where active tags rely on batteries, but can give you a longer read range versus the passive tags, which have no batteries, but, shorter distances. And then I've also learned over time where RFID is being used. And, we've seen applications in retail. I'm sure a lot of our customers have actually seen the technology and not even realize it in the real retail space when it comes to apparel or jewelry or footwear and stuff like that. Manufacturing, when it comes to safety equipment and mechanical parts, logistics for tracking equipment, and even fleets, right? And now in healthcare, which is, recently become more and more predominant in RFID technology, tracking equipment, medical equipment, patients, even babies in the NICU. So, I've definitely gotten to learn a lot about RFID, but like I said, I don't live it day to day. So really my first question before we get to Eric is for Mike, your years working with customers day in and day out, and now your specialization in RFID. What's your experience been like when it's talking to customers and really understanding how we can implement RFID in their spaces and their problems, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Anthony. So, obviously, we all use RFID today, right? Anyone in the New York metro area has got an Easy Pass, right? Which started years ago, right? And then now I think New York, within the last 2 years, they don't even have toll booths anymore, right? They just charge as you drive through. So, So, we get a lot of questions about RFID. It's kind of interesting, back in, 2007, 2008, even, 2010-ish timeframe, RFID was really the hot topic, right? Everyone thought that was going to be the technology. Everything was going to change. There was lots of movement. But at the end of the, Walmart had a big initiative to be doing RFID. But at the end of the day, that kind of, petered out a little bit. Obviously there are some good use cases, but they were generally things like Easy Pass and large type RFID projects. That's changed probably within the last year, 2 years, right? A lot more customers calling us, a lot more renewed interest in that technology. Obviously, guys like Zebra, you guys have refreshed your portfolio. You're investing in your supplies for including the inlays in your tags. But so a lot of customers, the first thing they do is when they call us, they're like, "I want RFID." Right. And they, in their mind, they're kind of thinking about it as it's like a black box, right? Turn off the lights and, everything is just going to kind of work.
A magic wand.
That's it. So, I was in account last week and they had wood, lots of wood products because they made basically institutional furniture. They're using no barcoding. They're just putting in their first WMS. And the IT guy goes, "Well, what do you think about RFID?" And I was like, "You're not even close to going to RFID, right? You're not even there, right? We got to get a barcode on stuff first, and you got to have discipline to move your products in and out." So so I think right away what I normally see from a lot of clients when I get that kind of question, they're trying to jump right past the barcoding. Where I see a lot of traction is guys that are using barcoding today, right? And now this is like kind of barcoding, version 2, right? I'm going to go to the next area. So
plus they know their process, they know their flows and everything like that.
Yeah, they got the discipline, right? I mean, key of any system, whether it's barcoding, RFID, or whatever, you got to have basic discipline, right? And I think a lot of people think of RFID of replacing that discipline in the organization, and it's not. It's a technology, right? You still got a business process that you have to follow. The question is, will the technology help you more so than, using a barcode scan as an example? So, like one of my comments to the gentleman last week with the furniture stuff was, I said, think about it this way. You have a pallet with 60 items on it and they're all barcoded. I said, or they're all tagged with an RFID tag. I said, what I don't know is, did I read 59 items or 58 items or 60 items? Right. When it goes through that reader. Now there's obviously,
because you're not seeing what you're reading, right?
That's it. Well, you're not seeing what you're reading, and there's obvious ways to check it, right? But how do I know that 58th item isn't in the center? And at the end of the day, he really didn't need RFID. He's moving full pallets, right? There was no big win for him to do RFID there. So I think one of the things again that we're seeing is customers that are existing barcode users using for new use cases, and that's great. I think the other thing is, traditionally RFID was a pretty large IT project, and I'm going to ask Eric some questions about that later, because you guys specifically made a lot of changes in your technology, right? Mm-hmm. It's way, way, way more straightforward. If you know how, as an example, to call a web service from an application, then I could dial up a Zebra fixed reader and call that web service and pass that tag information.
Right.
That really wasn't the case, years ago. I think the other thing is the cost of the tags have gone down, right? So Zebra, as you know, Anthony, you guys have put a lot of money into new presses and new machinery to generate RFID tags for your customers. And, with that, pricing has gone down. So now it's becoming more and more of a real project. So that's what we're seeing. It's actually, it's picking up a lot of activity. And I definitely think it's the next generation of what we're going to see is a lot more RFID.
Great. Okay.
Right. So, but so I want to ask Eric a couple questions about, his perception on the market. But before we do that, Anthony, I want to break for a quick commercial.
Sure.
And we'll be right back, guys.
Whether you're looking for modernized asset tracking or seamless inventory management, integrate Zebra's dependable RFID tracking with Avalon Integration for complete visibility into your crucial operations.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Mike, you brought up some really great points before we went to commercial, and it's a very unique technology, and it's the applications definitely are. Could be all over the place, but really, we really need to understand from someone that lives and breathes it every day. So I want to reintroduce Eric Malmed, Worldwide Product Manager of RFID Data Capture. Welcome, Eric. How you doing?
Welcome. Good to see you, Eric.
How are you?
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before you give your perspective on our thoughts, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, Eric, for our listeners.
Before I do that, Anthony, I think you can call yourself an RFID expert the way you were talking.
Nah. Unless we're tracking meat or
the only thing Anthony's an expert at is food and air fryers.
If we're tracking it from my air fryer to my plate, then I'm definitely an expert.
Yeah, I can say the same. So I've been with Zebra about 5 years now. The entire time managing RFID data capture products. Have a previous life in financial software and commercial printing. So definitely a wide breadth here of experience, but I love where I'm at, and RFID is definitely on the rise.
That's excellent. So Eric, here's the big question, right? We're seeing a lot of activity. It seems that, you guys are making huge investments. So, is RFID really ready for prime time now?
Yeah, that seems to be the question that everybody's asking, Mike. Like you mentioned earlier, the Walmart initiative back in, I think it was 2010, and then some failures and along the way. But I think it's safe to say that now RFID is ready for the limelight. The traction we've seen on our products specifically is very positive. We've got a wide breadth of portfolio, anywhere from printers to fixed readers to handheld readers and sleds and antennas, all the way up to products like our ATR 7000, which can track products in real time using passive RFID. The technology has really come a long way, and from a cost perspective, has also come down to where more people could afford it, and become more prominent.
All right. So let me ask a question. A lot of times areas of the country, you're a worldwide product manager, areas of the world, I should say. Some guys are ahead of others. So how are we doing here in the U.S. compared to RFID? I always got the sense that, Europe was a little bit ahead of us, or, maybe this because they tend to, adopt these technologies pretty quickly. But, what are you finding? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so the U.S. is actually very much at the forefront of RFID, especially when it comes to adoption rate. Actually, the two main markets, like you mentioned, for RFID are the U.S. and Europe for us. And we are seeing some other regions of the world where they use RFID for other applications outside of retail start to bloom quite quickly. So, for instance, in Asia, many customers use RFID to aid in manufacturing processes by providing industrial automation. And we're seeing more and more types of companies want to implement these types of capabilities to help augment and streamline their workflows. But I think that that while the U.S. and Europe are at the forefront of the RFID adoption, the other regions aren't very far behind.
Hey, Eric, that's very interesting that you mentioned the U.S. is leading the way. I understand that the cannabis industry is really looking at RFID technology and has been for the past couple of years. And we all know about the legalization across different states in the country around cannabis. And I understand that you also hosted a webinar around that specific topic. Can you give us a 60-second summary of that? Your thoughts on that in that webinar?
Yeah, sure. It was actually a really interesting webinar that was I was a panelist on with some of the folks from our distribution network. Yeah, so the webinar was really around how do I start up as a dispensary, and what is the technology being used for in the industry. So there's a term that they use that's called seed to sale. Being able to track the product from its growth all the way through each individual stage, and it actually helps with compliance. So there are some states which we call metric states, which are required to actually use RFID to provide proof of compliance.
So really, kind of almost like the regulation of the food industry in a lot of ways.
Exactly. Yeah, I think one of the main points that we hit on the webinar was to think about yourself as an actual retailer and not just a dispensary, right? So it's I've got to do all of these other things that every other retail shop has to do, including inventory, plus the compliance aspect on top of that.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing that. So that'll be great to hear. So I hear you saying, U.S. is in the forefront, a lot more projects. How do you manage all of this data, right? Because barcoding, again, we talked about a single, scan a barcode, you see it, you move on.
Right.
Now we're putting RFID and we're getting all of this data from the edge that's kind of coming into our central environment. How are companies managing that and the readers, and what do customers look for when they're trying to do something like that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Mike. I think when you look at it with a macro lens, every customer has the need to manage the things that they have on their premise, right? So the readers and every asset that they own, they have a need to manage that. But I think that every customer wants to do it differently, right? So some customers may care about the health of their readers. Some may care about updating firmware. Some may care about where the data flows, whether it stays what we call on-prem, which is behind the firewall, or it goes up to the cloud. And so I think that it even becomes even more interesting when you look at it with a micro lens. Like I said, because every customer wants to do it differently. And so what we are trying to do and what we're working on is being able to tailor it to the needs of our customers. So like I mentioned, some customers may want to keep their data on-prem, but they may want to manage their readers from the cloud. So we are providing a flexible infrastructure to allow our customers to do that.
All right. So good news. So adoption's going up, infrastructure's flexible. Typically flexible means better price. So that's good. So I'm hearing all these great things, but what are the things that customers should really be looking to avoid? I mean, when I see, I'll use my example of the gentleman I saw last week, right? He was just jumping like leaps and leaps to get to RFID, or at least investigating that without having some of the basic underpinnings. And, I know there's been active RFID and passive RFID, and the issue with passive RFID in the past was couldn't really read it from any good distance. So, what are kind of some of the pitfalls and things that customers should really be aware of if they're thinking about doing RFID?
Yeah, so, in all honesty, the passive RFID technology has clearly come a long way. I think previously the technology had some pretty big kryptonites, and from a physics standpoint, it still does if you don't address them or implement them properly. So, for instance, if you're trying to track metal parts, you can't just use a standard RFID label. It won't work just because the metal will interact with the radio waves and the energy. So, what you have to do is you have to have a special tag. And so for these special applications like metal parts tracking, another kryptonite is liquid. There are these special type tags. We make one for metal. It's called Silverline that you can adhere. It's got a foam backing to it to pull that tag or the chip off of the metal to allow for a much better read. So I think that the technology has evolved to a point where people are focusing on how do I solve certain solutions and not just how do I make the technology better from a generic standpoint.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring up the liquid, because I remember, again, I'm dating myself a little bit. Back in 2010, 2011, we had a lot of customers that were doing they called it slap and ship, right? Because the only guy that was requiring them to do RFID was Walmart. So when the pallet would come off a production line, they would literally push it on the side and break it down, slap RFID tags, and then rebuild the pallet. And a lot of the products that they were shipping, and our customers, they were liquid, right? And I remember some crazy statistic like Walmart only reads like 60% of our tags. So, I kind of always looked at it and said, well, how useful is 60% of your data? So can you talk a little bit more about liquid and because, obviously, we're talking everything from, consumer products from shaving cream to shampoo to all of that stuff. What is the customer, how do they address those kind of issues?
Yeah, so it really goes back to the tag implementation, and I do say, even when I present with my printer colleagues, that the tag is really the key to the system. Outside of connecting to the cloud services and all that, but the tag, if you can't read the tag, then the readers are useless, right? And the only way to read that tag is to have the proper tag on it and the proper placement. And so with liquid, we try to, like if you were to take a wine bottle, for instance, we try to put the tag or recommend that the tag goes where there's an air gap in the product. And typically, between the cork and the liquid, there's, maybe a 4 or 5 inch air gap. And so we try to recommend that the placement of the tag is of the proper nature.
That's cool.
Yeah, it may not, and look, in some instances, it may not be possible, right? Our RFID isn't a cure-all. It's not like the Greek Windex. But I would just say to our customers that you can't come into this saying, like you were saying before, Mike, I want RFID. It's just not the right conversation to have, right? The conversation is, I have a specific business problem that I need to solve. How can I solve it? And in all honesty, if RFID is the right technology, then it's the right technology. If it's not, then there are obviously certain other technologies like BLE or ultra wideband or other active technologies that we've got that can help to solve that business problem.
Well, you know what, Eric, that was really great insight. I appreciate all your thoughts and comments. But I do want to wrap this conversation up and summarize it for our listeners. And I do have a couple other questions. But before we do that, we'll take one more commercial break. Lot to digest for our listeners, and we'll be right back.
RFID already brings a new level of enterprise visibility into your operations. Take a step farther with Zebra's best-in-class MC3300R RFID reader to accelerate data capture and mobile computing. Now available with Avalon Integration.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So talking about RFID, and we're going to wrap this up. I think really Eric has given us a really good perspective from the manufacturing side, and Mike has given us a really good perspective from the customer-facing side. So Eric, I think we heard a few things. Maybe, Mike, you want to summarize what you think you heard as far as the technology.
Yeah. So, Eric, thanks again for taking the time to join us today. Really appreciate that. So I was real encouraged to hear what you said. So what I'm hearing is RFID def is here. The key is you got to have a business case for it. The key is you got to make sure it's all in your tag placement, but that the projects overall are a lot more flexible and easier to deploy and lower costs than they were over time. And my expectation is as we move forward, just like other technologies, that the cost of this will probably drop a little bit more, correct?
Yep, I think that's what we're planning for.
Okay.
All right, very good. So before we close this out, I have one question for both of you. With your experiences, what's been the most unique? Give an example of the most unique or bizarre or, whatever application that you've been involved in when it comes to RFID technology. I'll let Eric go first.
So one of the things that we've seen in the market is, customers wanting to track things as they're on the go, and they want to do it autonomously. And so one of the things that we've done recently for a customer is to outfit their delivery vehicles with fixed readers that are connected to a cellular network.
Really?
Yeah, and the modem that we're using has GPS capabilities, and so what we can do is we can actually tell where in the world something was taken off that truck. And so this customer had a problem losing tens of millions of dollars worth of plastic pallets a year. And so it was a no-brainer for them to outfit their trucks with this technology. But what we can do is we can tell where in the physical world that the pallet came off of the truck and help to identify what customer might have that specific pallet, so they can either go locate it or charge the customer back and trying to help with their annual loss problem.
Wow. So that's not a batch mode kind of thing. That's a real-time data using a cellular network and RFID data.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool.
That's kind of cool. So they know then if, I'm supposed to be dropping off 50 pallets at this customer, if I dropped off 75, they know that right away back at central headquarters.
Right. Yeah. Not
exactly.
5
and they
hours
know
later.
Exactly which pallets you dropped off too, right? Because they're serialized.
Oh, that's kind of cool. That is cool. Yeah, I don't have anything that great. I got a couple good ones. So, we recently participated in one client that basically was a paint booth. The process they used before is they automated the painting process, right? So RFID was key there. I mean, there's a perfect example, right, where RFID makes a lot of sense, because you can't use barcodes there because it gets painted over. Right. So you got nothing to scan. But the RFID tags are used there. And then I have another client that's using it. They're piloting right now in their manufacturing area where certain raw materials are only allowed to come out into an ambient temperature environment for X amount of time. So basically, as they carry those things out of the freezer, the clock kind of starts, right? And as they're getting closer and closer to the end, when it needs to go back, the system could start sending alerts to them saying, hey, you got 10 minutes, you got 5 minutes, you're late, the stuff isn't going back in there. So one of the things that I think is really cool is just all of the autonomous things that are happening, right? You can just walk around and things just happen, kind of like your pallet guy, Eric, right? I mean, his workers just unloading pallets, and probably half the time they just make a mistake, right? They grab too many extra ones. Now they got a way to catch that if that happens. So,
yep.
But really cool.
Really good stuff, guys. Let's wrap this conversation up. I appreciate both of you guys. Eric, you're welcome back anytime you want. Okay. Even if it's not about RFID. I want to know what that trophy is in the background, by the way.
You're gonna make it yourself, huh?
And I liked your Greek Windex.
Yeah, definitely a good comment
reference,
there.
Right? I mean, for the younger folks in our audience, that's from a movie. What, back in the 90s, I think it was, Anthony, or early 2000s?
Yeah.
It was my big fat Greek wedding or whatever. Where
that's right.
Windex, the father thought Windex was the cure-all for everything. You got a cold.
Maybe that's the trick. Maybe if the RFID solution doesn't work, we just spray some Windex on it. But I don't know. Again, I'm not the expert, so.
This trophy is it was a Father's Day gift for my kids. So if you watch the show The Office, Michael Scott, the lead character, has an award that he's called a Dundee, and so this is a Dundee Award for a best dad.
Oh, that's cool.
Excellent. Well deserved, buddy.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for participating again, and thank you to our listeners for listening to yet another podcast. And we look forward to our next conversation. So we'll see you then.
Sounds good. See ya.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.